Hello, everybody. This is Coach Aaron Saft in the Running is Life podcast. Today's guest, as promised, is Faith Raymond. And Coach Faith Raymond is just a wonderful, wonderful coach with a vast expanse of knowledge. And she's going to share that today with us. We're talking about the female menstrual cycle and how that affects women's training, recovery, nutrition, all of those sorts of things, because man, there's a lot that goes into this, and we're learning more and more every day. And I, as a coach, need to improve in this area myself. So I really enjoyed this conversation, and I thank for Coach Faith for coming on and really elaborating and shedding some light on this topic. Seems to be getting more and more prevalent in the podcast world, especially in research. Dr. Stacy Sims has brought a lot to the forefront, and we keep, like I said, continuing to learn. And that's my intention, is to continue to learn. So thank you, Coach. And after the conversation, I'll catch up with you all and let you know what's going on here in the world of running its life. Okay? Enjoy the conversation. Faith Raymond is with me. Coach Faith Raymond.
Hey, Aaron.
Well, thank you for joining us, Faith. Faith and I crossed paths at the USCA ultra running conference, but we met each other kind of informally, I guess, through raising money for the Vermont Adaptive for the Vermont 100. So Faith, once again, thank you for being here. And please, let's let everybody know a little bit about you and your background.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Aaron. And it was very nice to meet you finally in person after meeting virtually
Right.
a few times via Zoom for the race that didn't happen, unfortunately.
All right.
Yeah, so I live here in Vermont, not far from the Vermont 100 course. Me, my husband, and our brand new fur baby that we just got a couple of weeks ago. I'm a coach. I'm a scientist by trade. I do have a master's degree in oceanography.
Wow.
Not much use for that in Vermont. But why I have that degree and how I came to that is another story for another time. Suffice to say that my husband interrupted my job search in that field. So I ended up staying in Connecticut. And then when he retired, we moved to Vermont. But yeah, so I started off part-time as a coach. I was a substitute teacher when we lived in Connecticut. When COVID happened, obviously schools shut down, that kind of thing. And then as they started to reopen with the different restrictions they had in place and things that they wanted to add back, onto the teachers, my husband just didn't want me to go back. So I was like, okay, I mean, I get it. I loved being a substitute, but I understand. I have an elderly mom. Neither one of us are spring chickens. So he's like, you know what, you might as well just stay home and stay out of the fray and let's not go down that road again. So I started trying to expand my coaching business. So I have two coaches who work with me as subcontractors. One of them has a full roster. My roster bounces around a little bit. Sometimes it's full, sometimes it's not, given the time of year, especially. And then my other coach, we're building up her roster, and she also works for herself and has some of her own athletes, but together we serve a wide variety of athletes. We especially like working with women. Myself, especially, I love working with women in my demographic. That's what got me into coaching in the first place. Cool. Was knowing that there was an underserved niche out there. My experiences, I came to running very late in life. I didn't start running till I was, 45 years old, maybe. So through my own journey, I started realizing that I could no longer train even when I first started as, premenopausal slash kind of perimenopausal. Once I hit postmenopause, I realized I couldn't train the same way anymore. I was not getting the same results. Things weren't feeling great, yada, yada, yada. So that's when I really started to hone in my coaching focus on women in my age demographic. Um, you know, Obviously not a lot of studies have been done on women. We know that we're very underserved, very underrepresented in science, studies and that sort of thing. So that's been my mission is to help provide the best information I can to women, especially, but especially women in my age demographic.
Nice, nice. And that's the focus of our conversation. Also, just as a side, because I get a lot of questions about coaching. A lot of people are curious. What was your path to becoming a coach? What did you do in your journey so far as educating yourself and finding your way as a coach?
Sure. So being a scientist by training, if not by trade, um, when I when I was having these difficulties in my own training, my husband suggested, look, you love to learn, you love to help people. You obviously need to try and figure out how to serve yourself better in your running journey. So have you thought about becoming a coach? And I was like, I, I haven't, but I do love teaching. That's why I was a substitute. So I started looking for a certification platform, and I found USCA, which is all about the science, right? So
Yep.
that immediately attracted me. And this was when Rick was actually still living in New York City when I found USCA and took that certification. So I found him fairly early on.
And who
And
is Rick for those that don't know Rick?
Rick is the founder of USCA. He's the big cheese. And yeah, so I took at the time, he just had the running certification and the triathlon certification. So I took the running certification, and then that's what I used to launch my business. And I started quite small. I had 3 athletes that they were my guinea pigs as I was going through the certification. They let me coach them for free while I was learning and honing my skills and everything. And then when I launched, they came aboard as my first 3 paying athletes. And things just kind of blew up from there, mostly through word of mouth. And yeah, and then Rick called me and was like, I'm seeing you're having a lot of success. I'm really impressed with how you grew your business so quickly and effectively, and athletes seem to love you. And how would you like to partner with USCA and, be our director of coach development and, develop some programs together? I'm like, I would love that. So that's how I got involved with USCA. So yeah, I've got lots of
Nice.
tentacles out there. I do lots of different things, and I absolutely love it.
That's fantastic. What is the name of your company?
Run Long, Run Strong Endurance Coaching.
Run long, run strong. That's a good one.
Well, I came to that name simply because that's what I wanted to provide to my athletes. Right. I do coach. I have some athletes who are half marathoners. I have other athletes who are 100-milers and beyond, but my focus is ultra running. So that's where the Run Long comes from. And the Run Strong, because that's what I want to give them. I want them to be able to be strong and healthy for the rest of their lives. Yeah. So
nice. Yep. Yeah. I think the name of our company has to represent us and what we're trying to do,
Absolutely.
That's great. That's great. Everybody that listens to this podcast knows where mine comes from. Are you a Ted Lasso fan? Have you ever seen Ted Lasso?
I am not a Ted Lasso fan. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Not everybody is. Yeah, no, the one player on there, Danny Rojas, he plays football his life and he just has so much joy. So that's where running his life had come from.
That's
It's what
awesome.
brings joy.
Love
So
it. I love that.
um well, great. So thank you for sharing all of that. Um and this has been a journey for a lot of people to bring up this conversation about the menstrual cycle, right? Like that used
Yeah.
to be a word that was very difficult for a male like myself to say, and it took me a while because I grew up with that was something that men just didn't talk about, and so, um, as I started to evolve as a coach, I had to learn how to involve that conversation and not be embarrassed by it or because it was nothing to be embarrassed about. This
Right.
is something that can help women if we are listening to what's going on and the women listen to their body. So let's just talk about what's going on. um Now, with the menstrual cycle, why don't you just start? I mean, most women are going to know the menstrual cycle, and I mean there are going to be a few coaches that will probably listen to this. So
Yeah.
and be it male, female, we could probably all use a review of the menstrual cycle itself. Now, like we'll get into each phase and how it can affect everybody differently, but just give us an overview if you would, please.
Yeah. So I kind of want to add to what you were saying too as well, that
Absolutely.
it's not historically, it's not been just men who don't talk about it, right?
Mm,
Because when I was growing up, like we didn't talk about it either,
mm.
right? It
Yeah.
maybe amongst your friends you giggle, but it was not discussed as something that, you know, was open and honest and natural, right? If you even think about some of the religious overtones too, this used to be like called the curse and called, this and that and the other thing, and women were dirty and you don't. So I don't think it's just men. I think it as a whole society, this country anyway, that's a whole nother story. But we are very uptight, right, when it comes to things like that, talking about things like that.
Yeah.
So the more of us that can discuss it openly and make the menstrual cycle less of a four-letter word, um, I think that it's just going to benefit everyone,
Absolutely.
right? So, in a nutshell, it's basically it's the woman's body readying itself to be a host for a baby and to cultivate a baby. You have ovulation halfway between your luteal phase and follicular phase. And here's another thing that a lot of people don't understand. They just assume that it's a 28-day cycle because if you're on an oral contraceptive, that you have a 28-day cycle of pills. But the average woman's cycle is actually closer to 40 days.
Mm.
So, so when we talk about this 3 week on and 1 week off training, right? This is kind of what it was based on, and as you can see, that doesn't work. It
Right.
doesn't work.
Right.
Um, and there's a lot of, as you learned from Jason Koop at the conference, right? There are studies out there that show women can benefit by changing up their training to sync with their cycle. Some studies show that it doesn't really matter if you do that or not. It can be, more work than it's worth. But if there's one thing I've discovered especially as a postmenopausal athlete, if something's not working for you, you have to change it. Period. End of conversation. It doesn't matter whether what your thought process is supported by science or not. I know I'm a scientist by training, but at the end of the day, what's going on inside of our bodies has to take priority. So if something isn't working, we need to change it. So if
Mm.
you have an athlete who has a particularly difficult time either lifting heavy weights or doing high intensity workouts during the high hormone phase of their cycle, then I don't really care whether there's science supporting, changing up their training to sync with their cycle or not. I'm going to change it because they're obviously having a hard time.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Yeah. Good. And, it's been my experience in communicating with female athletes that not everybody responds to the varying phases of the menstrual cycle in the
right,
same way.
right.
Some may have better performances early on and some may have it later on.
Yep.
And I mean, it's, as you said, it's being able to communicate that, right? Like with your coach or
Yep.
in your planning, right? That,
Exactly.
it's, like my wife, for instance, knew when she wanted to race, like she knew at what part of her cycle she was going to be better, more apt to race.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so far, as tracking the menstrual cycle, is there something you have your athletes do or would recommend athletes do?
So a lot of, oh, I'm sorry, my cat's talking.
It's okay.
Sorry if you hear them. Anyway, so a lot of devices now allow you to track, whether that's Garmin, Coros, Polar. You can, if you use Training Peaks, you can manually put it in there.
Hmm.
But if you do use Garmin or something like that, Garmin especially has become really good about pushing that stuff to Training Peaks. They'll
Mm.
push like HRV now and resting heart rate and your sleep data, and it can also push if you track your menstrual cycle with Garmin, it can push that. There's other platforms out there. Is it Wild AI? I think it's another phone app that you can use.
Okay.
But
I'll check that out.
I don't have anything specific that I have them do. I just like to have them put notes in Training Peaks because that's my go-to. Training Peaks is my go-to.
Hmm.
The
Me too.
more information I can get into that platform from my athletes, the better I like it. Whether it's just communication on feedback on how their run went or anything, I have them funnel it right into there. So I have them put notes in there, and then we can try and kind of dig into, okay, let's look back and see what your last few months have been like, and let's look at the notes you've left, smiley faces, unhappy faces, and see if we can drill down and see if there's a pattern. Sometimes there isn't, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes there is no pattern. Sometimes
Sure.
there is.
Yeah.
So
Have you
yeah.
noticed anything so far as like HRV or resting heart rate? Have you noticed anything, any pattern so far as
So
the
again, we're so individual, right?
Mhm.
When it comes to
Mhm.
things like that. There's science that says your working heart rate will be a little bit higher in the high hormone phase, um, because I don't have anyone that runs consistently enough on the same terrain, in the same weather, under all the same circumstances for me to be
Mhm.
able to say, yeah, your heart rate's high here because you're in the high hormone phase, right?
Sure.
Sometimes it's
Yep.
the weather, sometimes they're dehydrated, sometimes they're fatigued, almost all of my athletes have other things. They have kids, they have jobs, they have spouses, they have elderly parents, they have this, they have that. So it's really hard to pinpoint what is going on,
Hmm.
right? But we do try to look for patterns and make adjustments if necessary.
Sure. And um, this is also a discussion, and I always try to say I have to stay in my lane and try not to, prescribe anything
Yep.
or recommend anything that's really outside of my lane. But
Right.
um, for those that do when they're having their period, if
Yep.
they have a heavy bleed, now
Yep.
is that something that should perhaps they should consult and see if they need to supplement iron or anything to that degree,
It,
if they're in like high volume training or heavy
yeah.
intensity training.
Yeah. So, with regards to any supplementation, I always fall back to you can't change it if you don't measure it, right?
Right.
So, this was also brought up at the USCA conference. Someone asked a question about Inside Tracker,
Yep.
and there were some mixed responses to that.
Hmm.
So I am a pro coach with Inside Tracker. I use it myself, and several of my athletes use it. And here's the thing, Aaron, if you don't know what your level is, you should never supplement like
Right.
anything, right?
Yep.
Regardless. And I'll get back to answering your question specifically
Sure.
in just a second. But so most women always assume they're low on iron because of the menstrual cycle, right? Well, number one,
Hmm.
we don't bleed that much to really affect that if we have a good, well-rounded diet, right? That
Hmm.
should not affect it too much. But we all assume that because we've been told that, right? That we could be
Yeah.
low on iron. So one of the first times that I tested with Inside Tracker, and you go to a Quest laboratory, like it's not their phlebotomist or anything. You actually go to a lab, have your blood drawn. They run all the blood tests, and then they just report the results to Inside Tracker. So I was actually borderline of hematochromatosis, which is high iron, which can be just as bad as low iron. So
Yeah.
if I just assumed that I was low iron and started taking a supplement, I could have sent myself off a cliff.
Yeah.
Um, so whenever an athlete asks me a question like that, my first response is get your levels checked,
Hmm.
whether it's vitamin D, iron, any of that stuff, magnesium, potassium. Before you start supplementing with anything, go and get your levels checked, because
Yeah.
some of these, especially the fat soluble vitamins and the minerals, if you can get a toxic level if you take too much.
Sure.
So that's my first point. Second point is I wouldn't worry if it was just 1 month that they were a heavy bleed. If this was something that was repetitive,
Hmm.
upwards of like 2-3 months, not only would I recommend that they get their blood levels checked, but I would recommend that they see their OBGYN, because there may be something else going on that requires some medical attention.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on.
Yeah. Now, the flip side to that, this one is even more important. If you have an athlete come to you and say, I missed my period this month and there's no way I can be pregnant, right? And then they come to you the next month and say, yeah, I missed it again. That's a huge red flag. Um, I had this conversation, myself and several other people had this conversation with someone in a Facebook group, right? Someone asked that question. I've missed my period for a couple of months. Should I be worried? And there was one girl that responded, nope. I brought that up to, I have the same problem, and I brought that up to my doctor, and he said, that's normal for female athletes. Wait a second. First of all, find yourself a new doctor, because he's obviously not up to date on, what's going on in the world. Number
Sure.
two, that is to miss your period unless you're potentially pregnant is never a good thing. Period. Exclamation point. So I think if there's any conversation that coaches can have with their athletes, it's that one, right? It's
Hmm.
not as important to build their training plan around their cycle, but boy, it's important to make sure they're still having a normal, healthy cycle. And if they're not, we need to do some digging. Either you're under fueling, low energy availability and red S,
Hmm.
or you're overtraining, or you have some other medical condition going on that requires attention. So to have that open conversation with your athletes, or athletes, if you're listening to this, have that open conversation with your coach, with your doctor, because it's not normal. I don't care what anybody says. That is not normal. That is an old way of thinking. And this is what's gotten so many female athletes, especially like at the high school and college level, right, into
Right.
trouble.
Yep.
So
Yep.
please,
Absolutely.
please don't ever say that's normal. It's not.
Yeah. No, thank you for bringing that up for sure. Um, and you had also mentioned menopause.
Yep.
Um, can we talk about that for a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
Well, so this menopause usually comes at what period in life?
So again, it can vary.
Hmm.
Usually women enter perimenopause and they don't know it, right? We don't always know it, especially if you're in premenopause. If you're someone who never had a regular cycle, you may never know that you're in perimenopause. But that generally happens somewhere between like, it's a wide range. It can be like 40 to 50 years old.
Hmm.
Genetics do play a little bit of a part. In, like if a woman's mother and grandmother went into early menopause, there's a chance that she might as well. It's not a given, but there's a chance. But then that period usually lasts from 5 to 10 years or so until the actual moment of menopause is when you hit 12 months with no period.
Okay.
So unfortunately, a lot of women go like 10 or 11
Hmm.
and then have a period. They're like, oh my God, is this ever going to end? Um, but yeah, so, and that can happen anywhere from like 45 to 55, sometimes even later. Myself, I don't, because it wasn't really talked about and studied as much, I didn't even pay any attention when I started going into perimenopause. Um, but I want to say I was post menopause, I was probably 54, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't even remember. It's been so long ago. I don't remember. Um,
Okay.
you know,
Like with the conversation that we were just having, when you did not have your period, did you start consulting with your physician?
um, yeah, I mean, we had known all along that because of my age, that was most likely what was going on. Um, and I'll be honest, I was like, hooray for not having a period every month. Until I realized how detrimental that actually is, to the body. I mean, it's a natural course of action, but it does start some downward spirals in a lot of areas. People think that sex hormones are just sex hormones, and that is not the case at all. That is not the case at all. They
Gotcha.
affect every single body system.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Oof. And so with that said, like you had mentioned, you just weren't feeling the same and you couldn't train the same. So
Right.
what did that look like, moving forward?
So so there was many different phases for that, right? Because
Hmm.
this was kind of it even starts in perimenopause, and I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. I didn't
Sure.
know this when I went through perimenopause, but now that I do know it, I try and stress this to my athletes and to anyone that I talk about running to who's female or who's a coach.
Yeah.
Is that period of perimenopause is actually when most of the late life weight gain happens,
Hmm.
right? Because you hear that all the time, right? That women start to gain weight later in life. Well, it's because of this wildly fluctuating hormones that go up and down and they're no longer in sync, right? You may have high estrogen and low progesterone, or vice versa, or they're both high at the same time, or they're both low at the same time. So those two hormones especially are antagonistic, right? What estrogen is the primary driver for muscle protein synthesis, where progesterone is catabolic and breaks down muscle, right? And when the two of those are in sync, then your muscle protein synthesis is in sync, right? Well, now when you
Yep.
start to enter perimenopause and 1 month your hormones are normal and the next month they're all over the place, your body starts to literally lose control
Mm.
over its own homeostasis. And that's when we start to have some insulin resistance, and we start to have some body fat accumulating even in our muscles, right? And we start to get some of that, and we don't store or we store carbs too much. And when that happens, it starts to get stored as adipose tissue, and you're starting all of this weight gain. So one of the things that we do know is that resistance training, heavy resistance training, helps to counteract that, right? It replaces estrogen. I use the air quotes, replaces estrogen as the primary driver for muscle protein synthesis. So if your athletes, I mean, we know that strength training is important overall anyway,
Mm.
but if they're not already doing it and they're starting to potentially enter perimenopause, or they're getting to the point where they might be starting that, getting them in that resistance training program is going to help mitigate that weight gain. And it's
Okay.
going to help mitigate the blood sugar, the glucose control and all
Sure.
of that stuff that starts to go haywire during perimenopause. Okay, now we get to menopause when we have no hormones at all, or very little, right? So we've now lost, not only have we lost the primary driver for muscle protein synthesis and the primary driver for blood glucose control, and we've started getting some of that insulin resistance and all that stuff. We also lose our ability to recover
Mm.
from hard workouts, things like that. So you can't, so if you, and when I say if things aren't working, you need to change it. So say if you've been a runner all your life and you're used to be able to run 70, 80, 90-mile weeks and do a lot of high intensity training, and you enter perimenopause and holy crap, everything's going, cuckoo, and I'm still able to do the 70 or 80, 90-mile weeks, but now I'm starting to get this tire around my middle that never used to be there before.
Mm-hmm.
They start training more. And unfortunately, what that does is that continues to drive your cortisol levels up,
Right.
which that's a whole nother, cascade effect, that we no longer we don't have the estrogen and progesterone protection from the cortisol spikes. So it just starts this hamster wheel, right? Of I'm gaining more weight, therefore I have to train more. I'm gaining more weight, I have to train more. And when in effect, we need to change what we're doing. We don't need to increase what we're doing. We need to change what we're doing. So then when I got into myself into menopause, and I was like, oh my God, I don't recognize this body anymore. And I can't do, this anymore and that anymore. And I can't handle. That was when I started really digging into this, things that Dr. Stacy Sims is doing and Celine Yeager is doing and other people in their space, and learning that instead of doing more, I need to be doing less and I need to be doing different, right? So the way my training changed and the way I try to approach my athletes who are in the same demographic as me is I started going to like a 2-week build and a 1-week deload, and kind of, starting with that. It doesn't always look like that,
Right.
I might feel good for a while and be able to handle more and then have to do a drop down week. But it's basically, that's the framework I start with, is 2 weeks on and then a 1-week deload. Also only running 5 days a week instead of 6 or 7, giving myself those 2 days a week completely off from any kind of training. And then that 1-week deload of really reduced training,
Right
giving
on.
myself that extra recovery. I've done 200 milers. The 200 milers I've done since being a postmenopausal athlete, I've done with peak weeks of only 50 miles a week
Okay.
and done successfully.
Nice.
One of them being the Vermont 100, and that's a gnarly,
Yeah.
race. Um, so my point is, you don't need to do as much. You typically need to do less, but you need to do other things, some high intensity, a couple of workouts a week are high intensity rather than just all long, slow distance. And then, adding in the strength training really made a huge difference for me
Nice. That's
and my
great.
athletes. Yeah.
Oh, and what does strength training look like for you?
I try to do a lot of compound movements, the bench
Mhm.
press, squat. Um, I have a hitch in my giddy up in my lower back, so I can't do deadlifts, but I can do like single deadlifts, things like that. Um, Kettlebell swings, and I try to mix it up with some unilateral stuff and bilateral stuff because as runners, we're unilateral, right? So you
Mhm.
want to become
Yep.
stronger in that single leg stance,
Yep.
but it's more lifting more on the heavier end,
Yep.
not the 10, 12, 15 reps with a lighter weight, right? Obviously, you need to
Yep.
start there. Whether you're starting your warm up or you're starting strength training, you kind of need to start there so you don't get injured, but more focusing on really pushing some heavy weights to get, because that's what we lose as women. That's what we lose is power. We lose power. We don't lose endurance. We lose power. So if you want to build that power back up, you have to, what Dr. Sims calls, lift heavy shit.
Right on. Yes. That's great. Thank you for all that. That's fantastic. Oh man. Um, Great. So we took us through menopause. Um, Other things that you usually share. What pieces are we missing here?
Know that we're missing a lot of pieces. I think that it's being aware of that a woman doesn't respond the same way that a man does, whether it's training, nutritional interventions. Our hydration needs are different, simply because of those hormones. And then later in life, the fluctuating hormones and then no hormones. That's one of the things that I try to impress upon my postmenopausal athletes is we often lose the drive, the thirst mechanism for thirst and for hunger. We
Mhm.
lose that primary driver when those hormones flatline. So you have to pay attention to that. Well, I don't drink because I'm not thirsty. Can't do that. You have to, and I'm to blame as well. I don't drink as much as I should. My husband's always on me about that. And it's simply because we don't have um that hint that, hey, you're thirsty. We don't have that trigger. Um and if you've ever noticed, a lot of older people, both men and women, they don't eat a whole lot, right? And it's because they lose that trigger, that hunger trigger. Um so we have to be cognizant of the fact that we now have to be the primary driver for these things. We have to think about it, whether it's setting an alarm or, you know, asking your spouse to remind you, whatever. We have to be very cognizant of that we have to be our own driver for drinking water. We have to be our own driver for making sure that we're getting enough fuel, right?
Yeah,
Because that mechanism is no longer there.
gotcha. Right on.
So,
Right on. Um, there's there's been a number of times where one of my female athletes will be going to their A race and they're in their A race and they're surprised by their period.
ugh, yep.
Yeah. In anything that they can do in race um to help with what's going on is there any suggestions?
Yeah, that's tough. That's really tough, right? Because um as well as I do that we definitely don't want to do any NSAIDs or anything like that when we're
Right,
in a long race because our kidneys are already going to be taxed.
right.
So it's really difficult to suggest if they're cramping or this or that, it's really hard to suggest taking anything like that. Tylenol might be okay. If they're having any of those issues. I find the biggest issue that they have is, how do I deal with taking care of this on the trail?
Yeah.
You know what? So my suggestion, when an athlete brings that up, that they're afraid, my suggestion is, during the training block, when they have their period, go out and do a long run and figure out, how am I going to deal with this?
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
the best methodology for me to use? Whether it's pads, cup, tampon, whatever, and
Yeah.
once I figure that out, how am I going to store it? And
Oh
how am
yeah.
I going to
Yeah.
deal with this? Whether that's, carrying a
Right.
Ziploc bag to,
Yeah.
pack out your trash. But doing that will help them also learn, because sometimes our tastes change, what we want to eat, what settles in our stomach is different when we have our periods, because of, again, those fluctuating hormones.
Right.
um you know Something that people, again, I alluded to this earlier, that these, our sex hormones affect all of our other body systems as well. And I'm sure you've probably had this conversation with some of your female athletes, that they're like, oh my God, like, I can tell that my period's coming. It's going to be in like a couple of days because my stomach is really upset and I'm having a lot of GI issues. Well, that's because the sex hormones that are now floating in your system, that are going to cause your uterine lining to shed that smooth muscle, right? Your uterus starts to cramp and pushes out all of that tissue. Well, your intestine is also smooth muscle.
Mhm.
So that's how I always used to know that my period was at like 2 days away, is I would get really, TMI, I'm sorry, but lower GI issues big time. That was my cue. I knew that, okay, it's going to be in a couple of days.
Gotcha.
So having your athletes train in those conditions, just like you would the weather conditions, the terrain conditions,
Hmm.
anything else,
Yeah.
will help them be able to deal with it better on race day, because they're a little more
Great suggestion.
prepared.
Yeah. Great suggestion. Cool. Very good. Awesome. Um, Again, anything that we should wrap up with, or you got anything else that you want to talk on? Any other
The
subjects that we missed in this?
the only last thing to add is, used to be called hormone replacement therapy. Now it's called menopause hormone therapy.
Okay.
Um, if any of your athletes are seeking that out for various reasons, the landscape has kind of changed on that a little bit. It used to be they put all women on hormone replacement therapy because it's, those hormones are protective of our cardiovascular system, our brain, like everything. So, oh gosh, she's lost all of her hormones, therefore we need to put her on hormone replacement therapy. And then, the study came out about these women having, all of these health issues because they were on hormone replacement therapy. So all of a sudden they stopped doing it completely. And now the pendulum is swinging back more towards the middle. And a lot of times doctors are very willing to do hormone replacement therapy, menopausal hormone therapy, whatever they want to call it, for women who are having life-changing symptoms. So, really bad hot flashes that they can't sleep, mood swings, brain fog, things like that are affecting either their job or their home life or things like that. So it's very safe. I, certainly would tell them to talk to their doctor about it. There's one caveat. A lot of women want that menopause hormone therapy to mitigate the weight gain. It does not do that. That is the one thing that for some reason it does not affect the weight gain. The exogenous estrogen is slightly different chemical structure than our endogenous estrogen. So maybe that's why it doesn't, work for the weight gain. But just having that information and letting them know that if that's the reason that they're looking to go on hormone therapy, we probably want to look at some nutritional interventions, and, strength training are probably going to be a better option than that.
Right on. All right. Well, thank you for that. I mean, you've shared a lot here. And that's fantastic. I hope that helps a number of people, not only the female runners, but coaches alike, because
Absolutely.
it's a lot to consider. So thank you for that.
Of course.
You said that you do have some availability for your own coaching. Yeah,
I do. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I do.
And how can they get in touch with you?
So I'm on a couple of different platforms. Almost had a partner there. So I'm on Facebook. They can certainly find me under my name, Faith Raymond Strafach, okay. Or I do have a business page, Run Long, Run Strong Endurance Coaching.
Okay.
I am on Instagram, both my personal, it's Confessions of a Runner Girl. And my business page is Run Long, Run Strong Endurance on Instagram. And my website is runlongrunstrong.com. So any one of those ways, they can reach out, and awesome. I'll be happy to chat with them.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, Faith, this won't be the last time we'll be reaching out. We'll have another podcast sometime and talk more about coaching and what that all looks like to each of us. So I really enjoy these conversations. So thank you for all you do and for all you do for our community. You're a great resource. Everybody can find you commenting on Facebook groups, and which is fantastic. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge. It's incredible. So thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you again, Coach Faith. There was just a lot in that episode. So I hope people can take a lot away from that, not only females in their training, but coaches, as we look at how the menstrual cycle affects training and racing, especially. So thank you again. And here in the world of running is life, it's busy. Man, it's busy. I've already had somebody reach out to me about training for Hellbender, which is cool. They heard the podcast, the Hellbender 100 podcast, and reached out. So glad that's still a resource for people, that you can go and listen to the Hellbender 100 podcast that we did. Lots of information in there, training, course descriptions, all sorts of stuff, what to expect. So if you're running Hellbender, Google that and see if you can find the old episodes, because that was a lot pertaining to Hellbender. I, of course, am also doing Hellbender. Super excited about that. My own training right now, I'm still in the base phase. I haven't started doing strides just yet, just really trying to get my legs back under me and build up my aerobic base. So sticking to, zone 2 and zone 3 primarily. I've done a few runs with others where the heart rate has spiked, gotten into zone 4, probably even some zone 5 with some of the climbing that I did with Morgan Elliott and Joe Quinlan. They showed me a new trail here in the Bend Creek area, which was just super steep, which will be great for Hellbender training. Glad to know that resource is there. Continue to strength train, continue doing mobility routines. I'm doing an active warm up prior to every run, doing form drills. So a lot of stuff that I'm trying to incorporate to stay healthy and get ready for Hellbender. But primarily it's just, going by heart rate right now. And continuing to be patient, watching, the heart rate drop. And I'm kind of going day to day based on how I feel. I did a long run, my longest run to date for this training cycle on Sunday. Got a little over 2 hours, but it was 10 miles, trail miles, of course. And just, again, being super patient with the heart rate. I busted out my poles. The leaves here are covering a lot of the rocks and roots, so I wanted a little extra stability. Morgan and Elliott tapes his ankles. Morgan just won the shut-in, which was really cool to see. I was glad to be able to be out there and volunteer. So very cool, and congrats to Morgan. And so he's been taping his ankles, and I think that's a great idea, just to provide some extra proprioception and stability, a little extra peace of mind, if you will. So, but you can check out online. I think Max King has a great video. I will certainly try to put that in the show notes. I'm making a note as I speak about the ankle taping. So, but yeah, lots going on. In everything, track has just started up for me. So, we've got indoor track and the athletes, getting ready for indoor track. Cross country state meet just wrapped up for the high schoolers, but they still have, foot lockers. I guess it's back to foot lockers now, for those of you that are familiar with the national championship. So pretty cool. I've been trying to be a little bit more cognizant of my footprint. I bought so many shoes during the Grand Slam, which was, that was not the greatest thing. So I'm trying to be a little bit better about not buying as much, and making so much of a carbon footprint with my footwear choices. My watch is it's starting to go. I have an Apex Pro, the first edition. It's a few years old. The battery, I noticed, is starting to wean a little bit quicker. As much as I don't want to replace that, I have the Vertex 2, but it just seems to be too heavy of a watch. It kind of bugs my wrist. So I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what to do. If I should somehow make this Vertex 2 work, or if I should upgrade to something else, but something for me to figure out. I did replace my waist lamp. I'll probably be selling my old Ultra Spire waist lamps. I also have a Kogala, so I'll probably start putting this stuff online. But if you're interested in, I think I have a Lumen 400 and a Lumen 600 Ultra Spire belt, because I just upgraded to the 850. But if you're interested in that or a Kogala, reach out to me. You can message me through any of the links in the show notes. So if you're interested in those, please reach out. Know that I can't send the battery. That's just something we're not supposed to send through the mail. I could check to see if I could send it through UPS, but lithium batteries, I don't think you can send through the mail. I think there's like a special permit to do so. But again, if you're interested, please reach out. I do have some headlamps too. My collection, like I said, I'm trying not to have so much of a footprint. So, and I don't want to be wasteful. So trying to sell those. And that way, my gear closet's a little less. So stay tuned for the social media posts on that stuff, because I'll be moving that stuff out here pretty soon hopefully at a fair price. So stay tuned. And we're going to do a turkey trot coming up here in 2 weeks. I'm going to run with my daughter. We're doing a 5K, but first time I've lined up for a 5K in a long time. Not that I'm going to be, well, it might be a race effort trying to keep up with my daughter. We'll see. But I'm excited for that. That should be pretty fun. My wife's going to do it. We offered my son. I don't know if we can get him out the door on Thanksgiving morning, but it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to that. So, but other than that, my first race really isn't until January. Doing the South Mountains Half Marathon, which I'm really excited about, and then heading to West Virginia in February and doing the Cabin Fever 50K through the New River Valley Gorge. Pretty excited about that one. And then March, I'll be doing the Heartbreaker 50 miler, which is on the Hellbender course in the tune-up for the Hellbender, which is May 10th. So that's my race schedule. Super excited for everything. Just happy to be running again. Really enjoying it, even though, like I said, having to be patient with the heart rate and just, go at the slower paces right now. I know it will be beneficial for me later on, and I keep trying to stress that to my athletes as well as to you all. If you have any questions about training, want to reach out about coaching, please do so. You can connect with me anyway. My website is runningislife.run. Check out there if you want to see a little bit more about my coaching style, coaching philosophy. And then again, reach out to me. I'll send you my call schedule and we'll set up a call and we can talk. Call schedule is a little busy right now. I'm doing year-end reviews with all my athletes, so we're going over how their year went, how they felt about things, and what they're looking forward to. Talking about goals for 2024 and race seasons, of course. So call schedule is a little bit busy right now, but I mean, we'll definitely get you in, definitely get you a call. So please link up with me if you're interested. Okay. Other than that, my friends, I think that's everything I have to say. So I hope this finds you well and that your training goes well. If you have an A race coming up, good luck to you. Some really cool stuff as a last touch point. I had 7 athletes in shut-in. They all finished. I was very proud of all of them. Some gutsy performances, as well as I think I had four runners. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I think I had 4 runners in the New York City Marathon, all of which finished and PR'd. Well, not all of them PR'd, excuse me, but had a PR there, which is impressive on the New York City course. She had just PR'd at Chicago as well, so Jennifer Byers, congratulations. The others, the one had done the Marine Corps 50K the weekend before. The others one had done Chicago, the other had done Berlin. So, I mean, just a huge fall. And congrats to Sandra. She's been a previous guest. She did get her 6-star, and we talked about kind of doing back-to-back marathons in these majors, and so Sandra achieved her 6-star, so congratulations to her. And lastly, I had 5 athletes in the Rim to River, is that right? 5? Yeah, I had 5 athletes in the Rim to River 100 miler. One was his first time, so Joe Bosing, I know you're probably listening to this. Congratulations on your finish. Mark and Laura Rollins, some local legends here. They gutted it out, and they've had a huge year, so I'm so proud of them. And congrats to John Horner of the Trail Trash podcast and Mike Reardon. The two of them did outstanding. Both of them, John had run Yeti 100 and Mike had run the Bear, both very recent September, but both got their finishes, and it was their 3rd time finishes. So just some really cool stuff that's been going on here. Really proud of all the runners, and their true grit. To have 100% finish rate in these type of events, it's just incredible. So super stoked. For my athletes, they keep me inspired and keep me looking forward to seeing what they can do and what I can do when I get out there. So really enjoying this process. Wrapping up a nutrition certification right now, sports endurance nutrition certification, and all I have left to do is take the test. Got through all the modules. There were 20 different modules. It's not that I will be a nutritionist nor dietitian, no, and it's not that I will provide nutritional advice. It just gives me a background as to what's going on with the body, so far as our metabolism, and understanding what the athlete needs, not only before, during, and after, but just, kind of in general, when we do run, at certain efforts, what's going on, what energy systems are using, what caloric intake they need, what it requires of the body. So it's just rounding out, some of my coaching. I'm really excited about that. Next up is a sports psychology certification. Again, not to be a sports psychologist, but I'm just trying to fill in gaps and, be a better coach and just have a more well-rounded approach to coaching so that I understand what's going on, physically and mentally. So, again, just trying to be the best coach I can, continue learning. I think that's the biggest thing in life, is that we continue learning, continue to strive to be better, as we do with our running, right? So that's where I'm at. I hope this finds you well. And until next time, my friends, keep moving forward, because running is life.